Okay, in this section, we're going to cover a few more aspects when it comes to melee combat and how it works. One of those aspects is zero firepower units and how they interact in melee. Now, they're going to attack and defend at a nominal firepower of 1 unless they're using a melee eligible support weapon that they can use instead. Now, each zero firepower unit that is attacking will cause a subtraction of 1 from their die roll on the melee table, or if they're in defense, they're going to cause an addition of 1. So, as an example of this, we have a couple of German squads here, zero firepower, and they're engaging in melee against this American squad here, okay? Now, you give them a nominal firepower of 1 each, giving them a total of 2 against the Americans' total firepower of 2. And this would put them at a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning normally they would have to roll an 8 or better to take it win in the combat. However, since they are a zero firepower unit instead, they're going to have to subtract 1 for each one of the units from their roll. This effectively means they're going to need to roll a 10 or better to win at the combat. When the defenders attack back, it's just the reverse of that. Again, it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. They're going to need an 8 or better normally, but they get to add 2 to their roll, meaning that they could take and roll a 6 or better to take and win the combat. Now, some modules or scenarios will have a specific rule called ambush that some units or nationalities will get. This allows an attacker, if they can attack a defender without the defender having line of sight to them, to take and triple their firepower and make the combat non-simultaneous. A good example of this, let's say that this German squad has the ambush ability and they engage in melee against this American squad. They jump the wall here and they get them without the American unit having line of sight to them. For this first round of combat, the German squad would have their firepower tripled to a 6, giving them a 3-to-1 ratio on the melee table. And if they succeeded in taking out the American unit would not get their attack back against the German squad. After this first round of combat, though, melee would continue as normal. Now, there are also M superscripted units that are affected in melee combat. I've got an example on screen for you now. This is very simple. All it means when you see that M superscript over their inherent firepower is that whether attacking or defending in melee combat, they're going to add 1 to their inherent firepower. The last thing we're going to cover very quickly is going to be the Calvary Charge that we had touched on very briefly in a previous video. Now, Calvary, if they are at least 2 hexes away from an enemy unit, can take and engage in melee by charging them down. When they do this, they are going to double their firepower for the first round, and also the defenders must pass a morale check to take and counterattack in the combat. If they fail, then they don't get to attack back and they only get to defend for that combat. So our Italian cavalry here charges down the US squad. They engage them in melee. Since they charge them down, they get to double their firepower to a 2, giving them a 1-to-1 ratio, and the American squad would have to pass a morale check against their morale of 6 to take and be able to counterattack during the melee. If they were a leader in the hex as well, the leader would have to take and pass a morale check as well to take and add their leadership value to the melee combat. Also, the previous rules concerning zero firepower units would apply to the cavalry. So if the cavalry were a 0 firepower instead of a 1, they would be given a firepower of 1. It would be doubled to a 2, and then they would conduct their combat, and then they would subtract 1 from their roll as normal.